The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk, one of the city's longest running television talk shows, now in its 17th year. The phones are open tonight and you'll join the dialogue if you call 718-960-7241. You can also email questions or comments to us by sending an email to bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Last month, the American Idol TV show featured a wonderfully talented Bronx teenager, but his appearance was accompanied by a 2-minute piece about his life in the Bronx that riled some people up. In particular, the borough president put out a statement saying he was thoroughly disgusted with the treatment of the Bronx on American Idol, and that the producers, he said, chose to highlight the negative stereotypes that have plagued the borough for years. Soon after, Fox News talk show host Glenn Beck derided Co-op City, saying it was akin to the failed socialism that ruled the USSR. This also upset the BP and other Bronxites. Still others, though, said, you know what? Life in the Bronx is not pretty, and it's a shame, but this media was, in fact, accurate. Tonight, we examine the effect of that media on our hometown, the borough of the Bronx. Please join me in welcoming from the Bronx Tourism Council, Executive Director Doris Quinones. Always nice to have you, Doris.
Hi, Gary.
Thank you for joining us. And a professor from the NYU Department of Media, Culture, and Communications, Professor Salvatore Fallica. Good evening. Thank you, Professor, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
What I thought we would do is just show people the piece, because there's been a lot of talk about it, but if we don't let the viewers see what it is that we're talking about, we have nothing. So let's let it roll. Jane and Michael upstairs, let's roll the piece. Let's take a look at what American Idol had to say about the Bronx, and then we'll talk about it right after we take a look.
The day's last dream.
I'm Travis Orlando. I'm a high school student. I'm 16 years old. I'm from the Bronx, New York. I have a twin brother. His name is Timmy. We're nothing alike.
You the man.
You the man.
And tell me about growing up in the Bronx for you.
It was tough. Gangs, drugs, violence. We stood in shelter for about 2-3 years. And at that time, my dad was sick. You know, it was hard for all of us. People that ended up in these shelters were people that had nothing. So yeah, this was it. It wasn't the best of everything. I mean, of course you can see, but it's the only shelter we could afford.
We came from a residential neighborhood, you know, because of the recession and all, and the fact that I got sick, we lost our home. We were in the streets, we were homeless. We had nowhere to go.
You have robberies, you have killings, anything you can possibly imagine, it goes on here. You know, I would see other families move out, and I would see other, you know, moving trucks come by, and I'm like, is it for us? Is it for us? And then, no, it's not. My brother, he was there the whole time telling me, you know, keep your head up, you got a talent, and use it, you know, don't waste it.
There's the chance for everybody in this country, and that's what makes it great to be an American. Never forget that you're an American.
Yeah, we were in the shelter. We're not anymore. Of course, we're still living paycheck to paycheck. It's hard, you know, it's hard for my parents. But I know that with this experience, it can help us out so much.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Through the door. It's it. This is the moment.
All right.
There it is. That was what American Idol presented. Of course, then he went in and sang just beautifully. I mean, none of this has anything to do with his wonderful talent, and we're all so proud of his abilities. It was ironic, of course, that Jennifer Lopez was on the panel as well. Doris, let's start with you. The borough president was upset. What did you think of what you just saw?
Yeah, I think these are the kind of stereotypes that unfortunately are still out there, and the kind of ratings that a show like American Idol gets really means that more people are being exposed to these gross generalizations that just ignore the progress of the last 30 years and don't recognize all of the really wonderful things that do exist here. So I think the borough president actually is doing the right thing and pushing back as he is.
Mm-hmm. We're going to ask our professor for some agenda for what the producers might have been thinking about. But is it necessary for anybody who portrays something about the Bronx? The young man said, and we have no reason to dispute the fact that he had a hard time, his family lived in shelters. We're assuming that's accurate, and there are many people in the Bronx in that circumstance. Why did the producers have any responsibility other than portraying what he told them?
I think their responsibility is to be accurate. And so there are absolutely challenges in the Bronx and things that still need to be addressed. But our sense was that the footage was just sensationalistic. It was the dangling telephone cord on the public phone, the litter coming like tumbleweed.
I think one of the things the borough president pointed out was the ambulance, which was just driving down the block. You could have done that anywhere, but we do have ambulances in the Bronx. I mean, they didn't. It's not. We're assuming they shot that in the Bronx. And there's no reason not to show that.
And actually, it was interesting. I saw something at the Boogie Downer blog where the post was that it looked as if that piece of the video was from the area around Bronx Lebanon Hospital, and they're like, well, it wouldn't be unusual to see an ambulance in the vicinity of a hospital. Of course, the idea is that the cumulative effect of this is a really negative portrayal.
He lived on the Grand Concourse, I don't know if we know what street, it certainly could be. It was a picture of something, presumably in his neighborhood. Professor, your thoughts, did they have an agenda of some sort, or were they simply representing what he told them and they went around the neighborhood and took pictures of what they saw?
Well, American Idol does have an agenda, and that agenda is essentially to manufacture celebrities. Whether they're going to step on the Bronx, which of course is what they did, it's really not their problem. They really don't see it as a problem. I really sympathize with the borough president and what Doris said before, is that there should be some pushback. But American Idol is just interested in creating a story around this very talented kid so that eventually they can market him in a variety of ways. Now, keep in mind that there's a whole infrastructure in American Idol. They will put him on tour. They've got publicists. They've got hairstylists. They'll have his clothing taken care of.
Assuming he progresses well and doesn't get voted off the island, if you'll pardon the expression.
Quite frankly, even if he doesn't progress all that well, even if he just reaches mediocrity, status, they can still put him on tour. And in a sense, what they're doing is they're ripping off the talent of the Bronx. Mm-hmm. That's what they're doing.
So back to the portrayal of the borough. So basically they said, here's a young man that came from unfortunate circumstances, but now he doesn't, and so that's the story they told.
But that's a great American story, the rags to riches story. We all buy into it. It's part of our, American mythology. That story was pretty well crafted. That was quite a piece. That was a 2-minute piece. Right. That was extremely well edited. That there wasn't any lapse in
and they did the production of the voiceover.
So essentially, what they're doing is they're marketing him as a celebrity.
So what you're saying is it might be unfortunate. The borough president, you're saying, was correct to push back, but you're not saying that they really did anything wrong.
Well, I don't think they did anything
their
wrong
perspective.
From their point of view. But keep in mind, I think it's correct for people like the borough president or other officials to push back on, because American Idol really will step on anybody in order to get their show across. I mean, I know I'm treading on difficult ground here by criticizing this American iconic show, but essentially, that is a show that has done It's not exactly a socially progressive show.
It wasn't like 60 Minutes portrayed the Bronx in this fashion.
Right.
Doris, back to you now. People live in the Bronx in difficult circumstances. We have shelters in the Bronx. It's no secret that our numbers on health care and our numbers on the environment and certainly many of our school numbers are not good. All they did was show that aspect of this young man's existence. I mean, you know, and using what Professor Fallica said, did they have greater responsibility, or is the borough president just basically standing up? In other words, is he really mad at American Idol, or did they have a responsibility here?
Actually, I think the concern is that, as you say, there are definitely challenges and things that still need to be improved. And this young man was telling about a very difficult time in his family's life. I think he said it was 2 or 3 years that his family lived in a shelter, and that shelter was in the Bronx. But to the uninformed viewer who's seeing this clear across the other side of the country, there's this very definite impression left that this is the entire borough. And in a community with 1.4 million residents, 43 square miles, we're larger than most American cities. So, of course, there's going to be some good things, some problem things, some better areas than others, but this didn't allow for any sort of nuance. And it's really not about hurt feelings. It's about the fact that what's at stake is that the reputation of the Bronx really has an impact on our borough's ability to continue on track with the amazing recovery that's taken place and continues to take place. Things like this really have the potential to derail a lot of that.
You know, I introduced the program by saying we want to talk about the effect of this media. Do you think, and you sit there at the Bronx Tourism Council, does this kind of thing have an effect on tourism, maybe potentially in the long term?
Absolutely. I mean, at the Tourism Council, we actually have a front row seat to what the misconceptions and stereotypes about the Bronx are across the country and literally around the world. So we'll get emails from people coming from other parts of the country or other nations to New York, and they'll write to us, we're interested in going to the Bronx while we're there, but is it safe, or is this neighborhood
and you'll
okay
hear
to
that
go
all the
to?
time.
Regularly. And so we're grateful for the opportunity. The people who have enough of an intellectual curiosity and who are kind of questioning the stereotypes, the myths that are out there, we have an opportunity to give them some factual information, and typically they decide to come, and often we hear back from them they had a wonderful time. But for each of those, how many folks just took what they heard at face value, never visited, never spent money at our restaurants, or went to any of our cultural institutions, or shopped at any of our strips, and that's economic development opportunities that were missed.
I would agree. I think what she said before is really important. There's no nuance in network television. The nuances of the Bronx are going to be lost.
You get one statement, and that was the statement that was made.
You're going to get a stereotypical view. That's what you're going to get. But if it's not the Bronx, it'll be South Central. It'll be the south side of Chicago. Mm-hmm. So essentially what you have is a media that really is not it's a national media. It's not a local media. And that's why you need to push the institutions that you were talking about, museums and even the local media needs to have a larger voice.
You know, under the theory, and Professor, I'm sure you've talked about this a number of times in class, the theory that all publicity is good publicity. Borough president was on Inside Edition. Right. He was covered on certainly the local newscasts. Right. He was covered in media that if he said, hey, let's talk about the Bronx, he wouldn't have had an opportunity.
Right.
So maybe, you know what, he didn't like it. On the other hand, write something else crummy about the Bronx, and maybe the borough president will get some more publicity out of it.
Well, it's a good thing that he actually did that. It was an opportunity, and those are the kinds of opportunities that a good public servant needs to take advantage of. If you criticize the borough, or if you unfairly stereotype the borough in some way, and you don't stand up for it, what kind of public servant is he?
I want to go to the telephones, and I'm going to do an editorial thing after we take a couple of calls and tell you what, because I blogged on this in a couple of Bronx websites, and I had a slightly different take on it. Mark from Pelham Parkway is with us. Always nice to talk to you, Mark. How are you?
Hey, Gary,
Good.
Professor, editor. I have a couple of statements to make.
Okay.
One,
Mark, you're always long-winded. We always want to keep you short.
Yeah, long-winded. Yeah, well, that's my
get to it and get out.
Well, here goes something you got to look at, and here goes the truth of the matter. It's edited, it's well edited, and it showed a lot of negativity to the Bronx. For people like me who are trying to get film production with my partners into the Bronx, take a look at the stats. American Idol, when it's shown live, has an audience of 24 to 26 million people. If you add the DVR, that's about 34 million people who saw the most negative impact on the Bronx since Howard Cosell made his statement in '77. Here goes something we got to look at, more so than the kid. Jennifer Lopez is a product of the Bronx. She's one of the judges. She learned all her dancing, every move she has that got her, she learned on Castle Hill, and yet she refused to say anything, and yet she's a product of the Bronx. When she calls herself Jenny from the Bronx, Jenny from the Hood,
the block,
or Jenny from
the
the block, her
She's
block
from
is
the Bronx.
Rodeo Drive. She forgot about the Bronx.
Right.
And
Well, this was one of the things the borough president was very clear to say, and you know, I don't know if Doris wants to get into it, but her relationship, Jennifer's relationship with the Bronx is wanting at the moment.
We need more positive aspects of the Bronx. Right. We need to bring film production and various other things in.
Got it. Thank you very much. Chuck from Wakefield joins us. Jane tells me he's a either retired or current police officer. That's an interesting perspective. Chuck, how are you?
How are you?
We're doing great.
Okay. What I wanted to say here is that we're blowing this thing way out of proportion. I respect your two guests, but you know what? I'm almost 50 years old. I lived in New York all my life. I retired from NYPD. What that young man was saying was what that young man has went through. And I'm an activist, so I know what that young man is talking about, and I fight for many families that are going through what that young man is going through.
So you're
I love New York City, all right? But like the borough president, like the mayor of any city, has to take up for their borough or for their city. Let's stop blowing this out of proportion. This young man is only speaking about what his family went through. And hopefully, and I pray to God that he does make it.
Oh,
just
we all
like
do.
Jennifer
Sure.
Lopez. But let's stop blowing this out of proportion.
Got it.
The kid was right.
Chuck, thank you very much. This is what I was suggesting earlier, that it wasn't inaccurate. Many families certainly live like this. Another concept that came up was, so he told his story, and I've been a producer on a network level and other levels. At what point, did the producers need to simply take his words and portray them, or was there something else they could have done? And that was my perspective. And I'll add something, but do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, whatever they got from the young man, they created, a myth. They created a story. They created a story that obviously touched us in a variety of ways, whether positive or negative. But it's a story that really will resonate with viewers, whether they're 24 or 34 million viewers.
My point was, and I wrote this on a couple of blogs, is that they told one piece of information, and that was he came from difficult surroundings. They never explained, and I know as a producer what I would have tried to do, even in a very simple way, how he went from those very difficult circumstances to become a wonderful singer. Right. Was he inspired in school? Was he inspired on the block? Was he inspired in a shelter? Right. Was he inspired by his parents? And that could have been done. My point is, as a producer, this is an editorial comment, folks. As a producer, that could have been done in the piece. They would have had a better piece. They would have been able to make the same sale that you want to make and had technically a better piece. So instead of showing the fire engine, who was it that taught you to sing? Maybe he is just a freak of nature and woke up one morning and could sing beautifully. But I'm willing to bet there was somebody who had an intervention. And had they done so, that aspect of the Bronx, which is central to the culture of the Bronx, because we have given birth to the greatest music, I think, of generations, that would have been, they could have done it in the same amount of time, lifted out that shot of, let's say, the fire, the ambulance and other things, and had a quick statement. Yeah, I learned to sing because my teacher taught me, or because my mom taught me, or because the guys on the street corner, and that would have been an even better shot. Right.
Well,
that's my point.
You're asking American Idol to be thoughtful.
I knew you were going to say that. I'm expecting too much. Oh.
Well, that's definitely what you say. It was my impression as well, that it was just lazy production. It was the quick,
although
easy,
the professor said it was good production.
Well, in terms of, though, it's more work, technically, right, but it is more work. to be more nuanced and ask
Right.
more questions and dig a little deeper. And had they done that, I think you're right. They would have come up with a more interesting piece and made this young man just more dimensional as well.
Right.
But you
Let's-
see,
yeah, go ahead.
in the larger scheme of things, the Bronx gets 2 minutes of really negative publicity. But essentially, that's what happens in national media. And that's a lesson we need to learn.
And so,
quite frankly.
and so
It's-
what I suggested earlier, the borough president did the right thing because he didn't like it, and whether you think American Idol did something wrong or not, he took advantage of it and got himself and got his agenda out there in other places, on Inside Edition, whatever else.
Wall Street Journal, so there was national media.
And there
that
has
actually
not
heard
been a
the other
reaction
side.
from J-Lo, as far as we know.
No, the media I've seen talked about no
She didn't.
comments
She
from
didn't
her.
call you up. No, okay.
No, she has not.
Doris, Jennifer.
I'll let you know the media she's
yes, Bob, I wish you would. Bob from Riverdale is with us. Hi, Bob. Always nice to have you. How
Good
are
evening,
you?
Gary. How are you?
What do you think?
I think that Diaz could be right because while he's only been borough president for a little over a year, people will say that is what you have in the Bronx because, I mean, we also have to say, where was Mayor Bloomberg? Had it happened in Manhattan, he would be yelling bloody murder. He doesn't care about the outer borough.
So what you're saying is that Mayor Bloomberg should have been as upset because he, of course, is an official responsible for one of the 5 boroughs. That's an interesting perspective.
Now, I grew up in Queens, Gary.
Sure, we'll let you respond. Go ahead.
And lived here in the Bronx. I've been here in the Bronx for over 25 years now.
Okay.
And years ago, I had a chance to be with then borough president Claire Schulman. And,
Okay. Bob, make your point. Go.
Well, I was beating her up on the downward trend of Queens. And all the Queens borough president could do is agree with me and tell me that she's trying to keep the borough of Queens stable.
So I'm not sure what your point is about
Now,
that.
since you have the...
Bob, get to the point. Say it.
I'm getting there, Gary. Since you have Doris on the show
Yes.
from the Bronx Tourism Council,
Right.
why doesn't she tell us how the Bronx has improved over the past 10 or 15 years?
I'm sure that I would ask her that. Thank you, Bob. I would ask her that, but that's a softball question. That's what she does every
really
day.
Is. I think just anybody who's spent any amount of time in the Bronx, or even a casual observer, knows that over the last 30 years, there's been dramatic progress in just about any measure that you
Despite
can.
the fact that those problems still exist.
Absolutely. And that's the reality, and that's where I refer to the nuances, particularly of a community as large as ours. I mean, the problems and the challenges are not that unlike the ones faced by any major city.
You wanted to respond, and then I'm going to follow up with
Right.
you. Go ahead.
He mentioned Mayor Bloomberg, who's really more interested in Manhattan than he would be in the outer boroughs.
Do you think, and now maybe it's because, and this defines the nature of the Bronx and the whole Howard Cosell bit and all that, if this was in Queens, if the young man was a Queens resident, and they did the same piece, but he said, I grew up in a shelter, which there are shelters in Queens,
Sure.
In Brooklyn or somewhere else, would there have been this outrage? Would the Queens borough president have picked up the phone with, the Brooklyn borough president? Or is it because we kind of have a little chip on our shoulder, given the history?
Well, I know the Bronx does have a chip on its shoulder. I think I think you guys do, but I think in Queens or in Brooklyn, the reaction would have been the same. It would have been the same because, quite frankly, that could have been shot in Queens.
Maybe it was.
That could have been
Although
shot
the
in
sign
Queens.
it said Grand
It
Concourse.
could be a Queens story because, from American Idol's point of view, they're not looking at what Doris said before, nuances. They're not looking at specifics. They're looking at a grand story of rags to riches, and that's essentially. So it could have been shot in Brooklyn, could have been shot in Queens, but it was shot here in the Bronx.
And it was about a Bronx. And I should mention also, we immediately, even before we had said we were going to do this show, I got an email from the Stonewall Veterans Association and their executive director, and it's not unlike some of the things you've already heard. They wrote to me that the producers are shameful. They knowingly gave a description of a part of the Bronx from 4 long decades ago, not the great revitalization now. It is endlessly and unfairly damaging to the reputation of the good citizens and hardworking businesses of the Bronx, and that was the Stonewall Veterans Association. On the other hand, Chuck, who called up and I think very clearly said, you know what, it wasn't inaccurate, why make a big deal? On the other hand, the borough president got his agenda out there, and frankly, American Idol we're talking about their program, giving them free publicity today.
Sure.
What do you think is going to... Well, let's talk about Glenn Beck before I even talk about the future. Glenn Beck, we don't have the clip, but it was a 30-second moment where he just, out of the blue, said, look at this piece of garbage, and he showed a relatively unflattering picture of Co-op City, and then derided its, what he called socialism derived from USSR. Your thoughts on that? I mean, same topic, or is there something different at play?
I mean, there's definitely some similarities between both examples, and the situation with Co-op City, of course, is that he portrayed it as if that community were a failure, when in fact it's spacious, comfortable apartments at more affordable rates than elsewhere in the city, and Co-op City is actually an example of a success story in the Bronx. But again, those are the kind of things
but
that,
you see, now
despite its problems,
people will call and say, that's not necessarily true. Is the Glenn Beck thing viewed similarly? The borough president reacted similarly. Should he be viewed similarly, or is it different because of the nature of his program?
Well, I'm glad the borough president actually did respond to Beck, but it's different in the sense that the American Idols, their intentions are simply to market this young man. But Glenn Beck's...
about 20 seconds.
Okay, Glenn Beck's agenda is larger. He's against any kind of public housing, any kind of public employee union, any kind of public service.
Should the borough president have a chip on its shoulder about that as much, or it's more of the... First of all, it was only 30 seconds. It was just Glenn Beck's going to do that.
Oh, I think we should all have a chip on our shoulder when it comes to Glenn Beck.
Professor Fallica from NYU, thank you so much for joining us.
Having me.
Doris, it was announced that Bronx Week is May 12th.
That's right. That'll be the first prelude event, and then the event actually kicks off May 15th through May 22nd.
Okay, and ilovethebronx.com is where we find all the information that you put out about the good things in the Bronx. And we thank you both for joining us tonight. And folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at BronxTalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program, like we did with the Stonewall Veterans Association. Archives of the show are available at bronxnet.org. You simply click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar, and that's it. We'll see you next Monday night at 9 for Bronx Talk. Of course, now in its 17th year, one of the longest-running TV talk shows in New York City. Special thanks to producer Jane Folloro, director Michael Arias, and our cast of thousands up in the booth. And to you, we love the Bronx. That's why we did the show. Oh, tomorrow night, I'm going to be down in Melrose at the... the Social Network Forum or something. So I'll see you there at the Peace Love Cafe tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Good night.
Dude, I did the most shocking thing today. It was just something I never thought I'd do.
Did your parents find out?
My mom cried.
What'd you do?